You have slain a dormant beast, Mountain King's larva. I dropped to my knees, gasping for air. My whole body felt like it had been fed through a meat grinder. Even the surge of adrenaline couldn't wash away the pain. Or the exhaustion. And yet, I felt exhilarated. The satisfaction of killing the larva was overwhelming. So overwhelming that I didn't even feel disappointed about not receiving a memory, a special item, sometimes granted by the spell, to an awakened who slays a creature of the dream realm. Damn it. A magic sword would have been useful right about now. A suit of armor too. Hell, I would have settled for a warm coat. 3 seconds. I can rest for 3 more seconds, because the nightmare was far from over. A moment later, I forced myself back to my senses, and looked around. The larva was dead. Good. Unfortunately, I was still tied to it, by that damn chain. Shifty and Scholar, pale as corpses, were desperately trying to untangle it, trying to buy the 3 of us at least some freedom of movement. Farther away, torn bodies and scattered pieces of flesh littered the stone. Many slaves were dead. A few had somehow escaped, and were now running for their lives. Idiots. You're dooming yourselves. At some point, the chain had snapped in 2. That was why it had suddenly gone slack. When I was dragged along by the panicking crowd, if the shackles had a simpler locking mechanism, I might have been able to free myself. But each pair was fixed to a specific link. Without a key, no one was going anywhere. The tyrant, the Mountain King, was hidden behind the blinding glow of the bonfire. Still, I could feel its movements through subtle tremors in the stone, and I could hear the screams, the ones who hadn't died yet. An enraged bellow echoed through the night. Some of the soldiers were still alive, still fighting. But what caught my attention the most, several of the mangled bodies were starting to move. My eyes widened. More larvae, one by one. 4 corpses slowly rose to their feet, each one just as disgusting, just as deadly as the first. The nearest was only a few meters away. Damn it all. And then, weakly, a thought surfaced. I want to wake up. A strange clicking sound filled the air. One of the beasts turned its head toward us and bared its fangs. Shifty collapsed onto his backside, whispering a prayer. Scholar froze where he stood. My eyes darted across the ground, searching for anything. Anything I could use as a weapon. There was nothing. Full of spite, I wrapped a length of chain around my knuckles and raised my fists. Come at me, you bastard. The larva lunged forward. Terrifying speed. Claws. Fangs. Pure horror. I had less than a second to react. Before I could move, a nimble figure flashed past me. Steel gleamed. The monster's head hit the ground, severed in a single strike. I blinked. What was that? Slowly, stunned, I turned my head. Standing beside me was the young soldier. Ha! The handsome one. The one who had once offered me water. What? Calm. Collected. A little grim. His leather armor was spotless. Not a drop of blood. Ease. Amazing. No. I caught myself. No. He's a poser. Yeah. Definitely a poser. With a short nod, the soldier stepped forward to face the remaining larvae. But after a few steps, he suddenly turned back and fixed me with a long look. Then, smoothly, he pulled something from his belt and threw it at me. Save yourself. And just like that, he was gone. I caught the object on instinct. watched him charge into the fight, then looked down. A short, narrow iron rod, bent at one end. A key. It's a key. My heart started pounding. The key to the shackles. Casting one last glance at the brutal battle nearby, I dropped to one knee and twisted my arm, lining the lockup. The mechanism was unfamiliar. It took a few tries. Then, click. Don't. I was free. Cold wind brushed against my bloodied wrists. I rubbed them slowly and smiled, a dark glint in my eyes. Just you wait. For a moment, violent thoughts filled my mind. Hey! Over here! Shifty was waving both arms, frantic. For a brief second, I considered leaving him behind, then decided against it. There was strength in numbers. Besides, no matter how unpleasant he was, leaving a fellow slave in chains felt wrong. I hurried over and unlocked both of them. The moment Shifty was free, he shoved me aside and burst into a wild dance, laughing like a madman. Free! I'm finally free. The gods are smiling on us. Neither was she. Scholar was quieter. He squeezed my shoulder in gratitude, offered a weak smile, then glanced toward the fight. 2 of the 3 larvae were already dead. The third was missing an arm, yet still fighting. The young soldier moved with fluid grace. A born warrior. What are you waiting for? Run. Madle, Amishiwa. Artari, Atomin, Atatalia drop. Oh, what? Ali? Shifty took a step, but Scholar stopped him. My friend, I would, if you say, advise one more time. I swear to the gods, I'll crack your skull. None. They stared at each other. Hostile. Tense. Scholar lowered his eyes. Sighed. If we run now, we will surely die. What? Me? Why? He pointed at the towering bonfire. Because without that fire, we'll freeze to death before the night is over. Until sunrise. Running away is suicide. Nearly. See. I stayed silent. He was right. I had realized it the moment I strangled the larva. As terrifying as the Mountain King was, the bonfire was our only lifeline in this frozen hell. So what? Shifty snapped. I'd rather freeze than get eaten. Or, he shuddered, turn into one of those things. He tried to sound brave. His voice trembled. The darkness beyond the platform made him step back. By then, the third larva was dead. The young soldier was gone, probably fighting on the other side of the fire. We were alone. Scholar cleared his throat. The creature may already be sated, or perhaps the Imperials will drive it away, or even kill it. Either way, if we stay here, there's a chance we survive, however small. If we flee, our doom is certain. You want to trust her, as that means. So what do we do? I didn't believe the Mountain King would stop. And I didn't believe a handful of mortals could defeat a tyrant. But if I wanted to live, that thing had to die. Let's go take a look. Shifty stared at me, like I'd lost my mind. Are you insane? You want to get closer to that thing? Nisharden. ID. New. I looked at him blankly. Shrugged. Elaine, Kyle, and walked toward the rampaging monster. I was about to face a nightmare creature. Not just any creature, A fifth Category 1. A tyrant. A walking catastrophe. The chances of survival were so low that anyone would have laughed in my face if I'd suggested fighting it. Unless they were an awakened, 2 or 3 ranks above the monster, which I most definitely was not. And yet, I still had to deal with the Mountain King, because the alternative was an even more miserable death. The absurd way. The odds had been stacked against me since the very beginning of this delayed execution had grown old a long time ago. I didn't even have the energy to care anymore. What was there to fear, really? I was already as good as dead. It's not like I could get any deader. So, why worry? On the other side of the bonfire, things were going from bad to worse. Most of the slaves were already dead. A few soldiers were still fighting, desperately, hopelessly, but it was obvious they wouldn't last long. Right in front of my eyes, the tyrant picked up a dead slave, dragging the chain along with him, and opened its terrifying maw. One crushing bite, and the body was torn in half. All that remained were bloody stumps inside the shackles. 5 dull, milky eyes stared into nothing as the Mountain King chewed, blood running down its chin. Seeing that the creature's upper arms were busy, one of the soldiers screamed and lunged forward with his spear. The tyrant didn't even turn its head. One of its lower arms shot out, grabbed the man by the skull, and squeezed. Pop. Died like a soap bubble. A moment later, the headless body was thrown off the cliff and vanished into the abyss. Shifty doubled over, vomiting violently. Then he staggered to his feet and glared at me. "Ah, well, we've seen it. Now what?" I didn't answer. I was watching the tyrant, head tilted slightly to the side. Shifty stared at me for a few seconds longer, then turned to Scholar. "I'm telling you, old man, the kid's sick in the head. How the hell can he be this calm?" "Shh, lower your voice, you idiot." Shifty went pale, slapped himself, and clamped both hands over his mouth. Then, he shot a terrified glance toward the monster. Luckily, the abomination was too busy feasting on the lucky dead and the unlucky living to notice us. I was busy thinking, how do I get rid of that thing? I had no special powers, no army, no weapon worth mentioning. I couldn't even scratch the bastard. My gaze drifted past the creature, into the endless darkness of the moonless sky. Then, a flash. Something burning streaked through the air and struck one of the tyrant's arms, exploding into sparks. The young soldier, my so-called heroic liberator, had thrown a flaming piece of wood and was now raising his sword defiantly. "Face me, devil." A distraction. Just what I needed. I couldn't kill the Mountain King with my own hands. So I decided to borrow some help. Not from a human, from nature. If I can't kill it myself, I'll let gravity do the job. I was still working out the details when the hero's foolish bravado handed me the perfect opportunity. Now everything depended on how long the pompous idiot could stay alive. "Come with me," I said, already running toward the far end of the stone platform, where a heavy wagon stood, dangerously close to the cliff. Shifty and Scholar exchanged a doubtful look, but followed. Maybe they mistook my calmness for confidence, or divine inspiration. After all, crazy people were often favored by the gods. Behind us, the hero ducked under the tyrant's claws and slashed with his sword. The blade slid uselessly over filthy fur, failing to leave even a scratch. The next instant, the tyrant moved. Fast. All 4 arms lashed out. I didn't see what happened next. I was already sprinting. Reaching the wagon, I glanced around, checking for larvae, then moved to the rear wheels. The wagon was positioned sideways to block the wind, its front facing the mountain wall, its back facing the cliff. 2 heavy wooden wedges were jammed under the rear wheels to keep it from rolling. I pointed at them. "When I say so, pull both wedges out." then push. Got it? What? Why? Shifty stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Scholar just looked at the wedges, then at the tyrant. Miraculously, the hero was still alive. He danced between the monster's limbs, always half a second away from being torn apart. His sword flashed again and again, uselessly. For once, I really needed someone else to survive. Don't die yet, I thought. Out loud, I just said, "You'll see." I ran again, following the chain attached to the wagon. Finding what I needed among blood, bodies, and viscera wasn't easy, but luck was finally on my side. The torn end of the chain. I dropped to my knees beside a set of shackles, still locked around the mangled corpse of a slave, and fumbled with the key. A muffled scream. I glanced sideways just in time to see the hero flying through the air. Somehow, he landed on his feet, sliding across the stone. No missing limbs. No fatal wounds. Then he rolled. Once. Twice. Barely avoiding a crushing stomp. Rolling? Seriously? Who rolls in a situation like this? I unlocked the shackles, shook the corpse free, and locked them again, this time around the chain itself. A crude slip knot. A loop. Now everything depended on my resolve, my aim, and my luck. I turned to Shifty and Scholar. No! Grabbing the chain, I faced the tyrant. The hero spared me a glance. His eyes followed the chain, then flicked to the wagon. Without hesitation, he doubled his efforts. Great. Smart, too. What a scam. I cleared my mind. The weight of the chain. The distance. The timing. Time slowed. Please, don't miss. I spun and hurled the chain like a fisherman casting a net. The loop opened midair. The plan was simple. Let the tyrant step into it, then yank it tight around its ankle. But the plan failed. Spectacularly. At the last second, the Mountain King recoiled, and instead of the ground, the loop slid perfectly around its neck. An iron noose. For a heartbeat, I froze. Then I clenched my fists, barely stopping myself from cheering. Yes. I turned to check the wagon, and my blood ran cold. Shifty and Scholar had removed the wedges and were pushing with all they had. But the wagon was rolling. Slowly. Way too slowly. The tyrant was already reaching for the chain. My eyes widened. Then, impact. The hero slammed into the monster's leg, knocking it off balance. Buying us time, I ran back to the wagon and threw myself against it, pushing alongside Shifty and Scholar with everything left in my battered, exhausted body. Roll! Move, you creaky piece of shit! The wagon picked up speed. Not enough! At the same time, the tyrant finally grabbed the chain around its neck. Now! It was just a question of what would happen first. Roll, you creaky piece of shit! I pressed myself against the wagon, pushing with everything I had left. 4 powerful oxen had once pulled this thing. Now they were dead, and instead of them, 3 exhausted slaves were trying to do the job. Even with the slope helping us, the wagon was moving painfully slowly. The tyrant, on the other hand, was fast. With a vicious swipe of its lower arms, it knocked the hero back, then raised its other 2 hands to its neck, trying to grab the chain wrapped around it like a noose. Ironically, its monstrous body betrayed it. Those long, terrifying bone claws were perfect for ripping flesh apart, but terrible for delicate work. The creature struggled, trying to grab the chain without slicing its own neck open. It wasted precious seconds. By then, the wagon was almost at the edge of the cliff. Come on. Just a little more. Everything after that happened in a blur. The rear wheels finally slipped off the road, hanging over the dark, bottomless abyss below. The Mountain King came toward us, staring with its 5 dull, milky eyes. No rage, no panic, just empty indifference. The wagon lurched violently, throwing Shifty and Scholar off their feet, then froze, balanced on its middle axis. I was the only one still standing. I took one last look at the towering monster, then slammed my shoulder into the front of the wagon, throwing my entire weight into it. The balance broke. The wagon tipped and rolled over the edge, its underside scraping against jagged rocks with a deafening screech. I stumbled forward and dropped to my knees, barely stopping myself from falling after it. Turning my head, I looked at the tyrant and smiled. A nasty smile. The Mountain King tried to lunge at me, but it was already too late. The chain snapped tight. With a violent yank, the tyrant was pulled backward and dragged off the cliff, flailing like a rag doll. It fell into the darkness without a sound, as if it couldn't accept that it had been defeated by a scrawny human. Go and die, bastard. I sucked in one deep, ragged breath and collapsed onto the stone, utterly exhausted. Is that it? Did I pass the trial? I lay there, staring at the night sky, waiting for that faint, familiar voice to announce my victory. Instead, pain arrived. Wave after wave of it. Everything I ignored finally caught up with me. Whoa! I groaned. My whole body hurt, especially my back, where the slaver's whip and the bone spikes of the larva had torn my skin apart. The cold crept in again, making me shiver uncontrollably. Guess not. My thoughts felt slow, heavy, muddy. What else am I supposed to do now? A shadow fell over me. I looked up. The hero stood there, calm, composed, annoyingly handsome as ever. His armor was scratched and dirty, but otherwise he looked perfectly fine. He held out a hand. Stand up. You'll freeze to death. I sighed. So, my first nightmare wasn't over after all. Gritting my teeth, I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring his hand. All around us lay carnage. Everyone else was dead. Bodies covered the stone platform, mangled, torn apart, barely recognizable. Here and there, the disgusting remains of larvae were scattered among them. The fire crackled nearby, its shadows dancing cheerfully across the stones, completely indifferent to the horror. Honestly, I was too tired to care. Shifty and Scholar were already standing, watching the hero warily. Shackles or not, they were still slaves, and he was still a slaver. Noticing their looks, the soldier sighed. Come closer to the fire. All of you. We need warmth, and we need to decide what to do next. Without waiting for an answer, he turned and walked away. After a short hesitation, we followed. Sometime later, the four of us sat around the bonfire, soaking in its heat. Shifty and Scholar stayed close together, keeping their distance from the hero. I sat apart. Not because I trusted one of them more than the others. I just didn't like people. Growing up, I was always an outsider. It wasn't that I hadn't tried to connect, it just never worked. Like I was missing some tiny but essential part everyone else had. A broken gear in my brain. Because of that, people confused me. I copied their behavior as best I could, but it always came out wrong. Awkward. Off. It made them uncomfortable, and people hate what's different. Eventually, I stopped trying and settled into being alone. It suited me, kept me alive, saved me from getting stabbed in the back more than once. That's why I wasn't thrilled about spending the rest of this nightmare with 3 strangers. So I stayed quiet. After a while, the hero broke the silence. When the sun rises, we'll gather whatever food and water we can find and head back down the mountain. Shifty shot him a glare. And go back into chains? The soldier sighed. We can part ways once we leave the mountains. Until then, I'm responsible for keeping you alive. We can't continue forward. The mountain pass is too long and too dangerous. Without the supplies that were on the wagon, your chances are slim. So going back is our best option. Scholar opened his mouth, then closed it again. Shifty cursed, clearly convinced. We can't go down. They all turned toward me. Shifty barked a laugh and glanced at the hero. Don't listen to him, my lord. The boys, Touched by the gods. Crazy is what I mean. The hero frowned. You're alive because of this child's courage. Aren't you ashamed to speak about him like that? Shifty shrugged. The soldier shook his head. I want to hear his reasoning. Tell me. Why can't we go down? I shifted under their stares. Because the monster isn't dead.